Well, hello. Hello, Mike Manley. What are you reading? Pray tell.
Hello.
Oh, I saw you. You kind of previewed that book on Facebook today. Tell us about.
No, on Instagram.
Oh, on IG.
I reeled it.
Oh yeah, that's some new stuff. Like I'm not even down with reels yet.
I got this.
It's
new
called
book called Down. It's by this artist who do a lot of covers and really just awesome illustrations. Tony Sarg is his name, and he used to do a lot of these really awesome.
That's gorgeous.
And he would do. They're basically all down shots.
Yeah.
Like here's one of City Hall.
Oh wow, that's cool. That's amazing.
And so there were all these really amazing, almost kind of like before. What was it? Richard Scarry or Where's Waldo? You were always looking down on a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And also I was always wondered if Mobius or Jeff Darrow saw this stuff.
And about what? That's like the 30s, 40s. When is
this? This stuff is probably the 40s. Let me see here. Doesn't have the date. This book was really incredibly cheap on Amazon. You can always find really good bargains. So there's all these shots around New York. This might have just been done for the. I have to go back and read the whole thing. It was published first in 1926.
Wow, I was close, right? That's
right, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And what I also love about this is
I can tell because there's no black people in it. We weren't invented yet.
That's right. I'm sure. Well, wait a minute. I bet you. I will find a black person, but they will probably be.
Yeah,
they will probably be a Steve Dorr or a.
yeah, the red cap or something like that.
Yeah, there's one in Chinatown.
Oh wow!
Well, I also love the.
That's amazing.
The limited color that you would often see in old books like that.
Yeah,
he probably did an overlay for each one of those colors.
Yeah.
But I love this guy's stuff. And
that's beautiful stuff, man.
Yeah. So
and we already got a comment from the room. Our buddy Gare said, "You always share such awesome art." I think that's a unsung component of Pencil to Pencil, Mike. That you're going to get some dope content, even if you weren't expecting it.
Right. Here's one of the Museum of Natural History.
Oh wow. I went to the Jacques Cousteau Museum in where was that? Monaco, I think. Yeah, we were in France. It was dope. Good stuff, man. All right, everybody. Well, hello. You know the international greeting of Pencil to Pencil. We're back again. Little pre-Kirby hands. Welcome back to the podcast, you guys. This is live every Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST. I am your first host, Philadelphia's favorite son, and Han Solo stand-in, Jamar Nicholas. Nice to see you. It is snowing like crazy outside, and I had to get kitted up to go out there and battle the elements.
I know. I put on my Neil Armstrong.
Jared D was like, "Wait, is Mike in a spacesuit hoodie?"
I'm in my Apollo 11 spacesuit sweatshirt.
Yo, that's bananas. I love that. I love that shirt. And also, as you all know, joined with me by the proverbial hip is my best bud and modern master of comic books. Modern master of comic books, Michael Manley. Say hi, Mike.
I am not a modern master.
I know you hate that, man, but you're an icon, man. You and Brett, you guys command respect in the art.
No. You know when I can command respect? When I can walk into the Acme, get 5 steaks, just put them up like this, walk out, see ya. And you know who that was?
You just stacked.
Who's that man? He just stole the steak. No, that's like Manley. He commands respect.
He's stacking.
When I can do that, When I do that, I will command respect.
And
I just play Mignon and just walk right out of the Acme.
And I am but the third host of this lovely show. Welcome. I'm glad everybody's back to hang out with Cartoonist Shop Talk. As I've said before,
in your new eyeballs.
Oh, yeah. I got some new specs. I'm getting some compliments on those. These aren't clear. They're frosted. Almost made out of ice because I'm that cool.
Pluto Nash.
So, yeah, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. If you're joining us here for the first time because you followed Scotty Young through the wormhole, hello. We're watching. You can check us out on Facebook, on our Facebook page, maybe some of my personal pages. Also, we have a YouTube channel. I'm trying to march us to 500. You would think we'd be past 500 at this point. We've almost done a year of podcast.
It would be like 1 million by now.
Hey, but it's all about getting the word out. It's all about signal boosting. But I'm always excited when we have new guests, and a lot of the guest fans follow in, and some of them never leave. So welcome to everybody. So what I want to do is I want to bring in our guests so we can have some lively discussion. If this is your first time watching, this is interactive, so feel free to throw in some comments or some questions. I'll try my best to get the questions on, but I don't guarantee it, so don't get salty. This is a salt-free zone and a neckbeard-free podcast.
I'm there, and Jamar ignores me.
Hey, it happens. Shannon, what up? Shannon says, "Go Scotty, Mike, and Jamar." That's what's up. All right. So let's bring this guy in. I've been a big fan of Scotty's for years. We talk a lot about classes of comic book artists. Like, it seems like a bunch of guys and ladies show up in little like clusters, and then they just kind of make their way through the industry. And we had Kari Randolph on a couple of months ago, and I know, if I'm not mistaken, that Kari and Scotty and a couple of other guys all kind of came in the door around the same time. So one thing that's really interesting to talk about is kind of like the port of entry for a lot of cartoonists. We talked about the early internet, or the end of the 1.0 internet, where a lot of guys came in off message boards, or it might have been Shane's drawing board, or it could have been the Ellis Forum, and now we're in this new space where people are just swimming out in open water. So I'd like to talk about that.
You don't think it's the Twitter? You don't think it's the Twitter era?
Maybe, but let's bring Scotty in. We can talk all about it. Acclaimed cartoonist, and I called him a style king. I don't put that out often, so he deserved that. He deserves that. Let's bring in Scotty Young. Scotty, what's up, bro?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey, what's going on?
How are you?
I am doing great.
Is it snow there?
No, Kansas City the weather's pretty. I mean, it was cold today, but it was nice and sunny. I think we had 1 day of snow about a month and a half ago, but it's last week was in the mid 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm moving to Kansas City.
It was a beautiful weekend too, and it just fell off the cliff.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into it, Scotty.
Let's do it.
I was talking to you and your sister a little earlier about maybe bringing some images. And then, I said, maybe you don't have to, you do, you don't. One thing that I find really interesting about our conversations is sometimes we don't even get to the art, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like, we're just talking shop real heavy, and sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't. So I think at this point, everybody's familiar with Scotty's work, but if they aren't, you can go check it out.
Yeah, I got the email and I was like, you know what? I just kind of want to nerd out with some buddies tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
Leave my art at the office, and we're just gonna talk shop.
Yeah, we don't need to do a PowerPoint tonight. We're just gonna kick it. So Scotty, maybe we can start on that kind of cold open that I did. You want to talk a little bit about your year one in the industry and kind of how you got in the door, and then
what was your wormhole?
Yeah, what's your wormhole, Scotty?
Yeah, it's so funny because last night Megan had actually who you were talking about, who my assistant works with me at the company, and she came over last night and we just had dinner, and me and her and Casey were sitting around having drinks, and Casey left the room and brought back Casey's first demo. She's a singer-songwriter and brought back her first demo. And then also brought up my first Marvel comic, Iceman #3. So we just looked at it last night. So it's interesting to be having that conversation now. But yeah, I came in with Kari Randolph, Mark Brooks, John Samariva, Sean Murphy, just a whole slew of guys. Like you said, that was kind of my class. Kari was one of my, and we all were message board kids. Like we were early 20s. It was kind of at the birth of all that, you know, like you couldn't have having a website cost a lot of money. Like, like back then to get a lot of your artwork online for people to see was very difficult. There was DeviantArt hadn't quite started yet. Message boards were a thing that was the only free way to put a lot of your art out. Right.
And get people to see it all in one spot.
Right. So there'd be like you said, like Shane Glein's message board, Pencil Jack, Digital Webbing Forum was huge. Joe Mads Forum was huge. So there was just a lot of forums that you would just go and like I'd do a drawing and then just go, and I learned whatever the code, I can't even remember, the CCS or CS, I can't even remember. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like when you like learned how to code everything and drop the image in and all, but you also had to find a host for your image. So it was wacky, right? It was like like looking back, it was like the duct tape days of the internet. Like everything looked like you build it in your garage with duct tape. So what we did, like a bunch of us that kind of had the same influences, and so like me and Kari and Greg Titus and some of the other people I mentioned, John Samariva, who Red J people would know as Red J, Sean Murphy, a lot of Mark Brooks, a lot of people that had similar interests. A lot of us listened to the same music. We were coming from the same place of movies and comics and things like that. There started to pop up. There was a few art collectives that kind of banded together and shared a site. So, and the first couple that I saw of that, I was like, that's a really good idea. Like, there was like Sequence Protocol, Art Monks was one of them. There was a few a few of them popped up, and I was like, that's a really good idea. I think that I could try that with the crew that we're like the crew that we're starting to do that. So at one time, me and Mark Brooks, I flew to Atlanta, and Mark Brooks and I were driving from Atlanta to Florida for MegaCon. Mark was doing some work for a smaller indie company. I can't remember if I had done Iceman yet or not. Maybe I have, but like I was not in the business yet. Like I was still like hustling, trying to figure it out. And on that drive, I remember us talking like about like, hey, maybe we'll do one of those studios, right? Like the virtual, you didn't call it a virtual studio because you kind of wanted people to think you were a bunch of dudes, you know, or a bunch of cartoonists in a room kicking it, right? So we talked about it that whole drive. We actually drove to Savannah first and picked up Christian Donaldson and Sean Murphy. They were still in college. They were going to SCAD. That's how long ago that was. Sean Murphy was still in college. We picked him up at school, and we all drove down to MegaCon. And by the end of that weekend, we kind of had decided that we were going to like kind of start this collective. And we called it Lead Heavy. And so we started a message board, and it was me and Kari and Greg and Sean and John. Later, Sean Galloway joined us, Cheeks, who later he kind of came on with us. And we just did it. And the whole idea behind it was we could share the cost, because it cost a lot to have the bandwidth to host that many images. And that's a thing that nobody today understands. Like, you could have so much work, like Instagram, you could have your whole career on Instagram for free. And back in the day, you know, to have 30 images on a website was so much bandwidth that it was like $100, you know, to a poor artist, like $100 a month for a website was not doable.
Or you would reach the limit and then your image wouldn't show anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. You'd have a broken link.
Right.
So
yeah.
the concept behind it is like, let's get on here let's share the weight of the cost of this. So now we have it. We threw a little money and had some designers kind of come and do the design. We had Public Enemy shut them down playing at our intro. We had like an animated intro. And we were kind of like, I call it was the act as if era. Like we kind of pretended that we had already made it.
Yeah.
And in doing that, we kind of manifested it. And like those names, everybody who I named there, we started off and each one of us had either no jobs yet or maybe one tiny job. I think back then Corey might have been further than most of us because he was already plugged into the animation world, more so than the comics world. But every name that I just mentioned from that group has gone on to like, we've all made it, it worked. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of our portal was basically just living on these message boards, but not in the way that I see it today. And I'm not dissing today because I'm a part of that as well. Yeah. But we really, really, really found a community. Like these people that I met, strangers who I did not know what they looked like. Half the time I didn't know their gender, color, race, anything. They were a name and artwork, but they became a community in a friend group in a way that I don't know where that's replicated now. Maybe Facebook groups are getting close to that. I don't do that stuff, but maybe I don't know. Yeah. But I can say that all those people that I mentioned and all those people that are part of those message boards, even if they weren't a part of the site that we built, they're still my friends today, 20 years later, which is
it was also different though. It was different. It was a different because I met Cheeks and some other people on the drawing board. The old drawing board, right. And people were much more supportive and sharing, and not as critical. It wasn't like it's also to go back a little bit. When I started in '95, I incorporated. I got my website. I had my own server. Well, I had a website so I could park my images.
Right.
My server and put them on my blog or anywhere else because of what you said.
Right.
And if you didn't and you wanted to put up 5 images or 10 images here, next thing you'd have, like 500 megabytes worth of material. Right. Yep. And I remember people would say, oh, I've exceeded my bandwidth. And there would just be like a broken link for that person's stuff.
Yeah, I remember fearing that we were going to crash because the message board started to get popular. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, we can't afford to expand the bandwidth because the message board keeps crashing us.
Yeah, we kind of were like in the same kind of bracket of time. And a lot of people who've watched the show know that I co-founded the same kind of crew, the Indie Cred All-Stars, where a bunch of people came out of there. Yeah. Mike Norton was like the big brother in that crew.
Awesome.
And there was a point like we ran off of a Yahoo group. That's how far back that.
Wow.
Yeah, before anybody really had like a website. And I remember I had a website and I knew some dudes who coded and they kind of created this whole thing and they just asked me to plug it in. And they're like, oh yeah, so also it comes with a message board package. I was like, message board? Well, how many? Oh, how many do you want? I was like, oh shit, I could have like a million message boards. So that started the JNN, the Jamar Nicholas network. So I brought a bunch of dudes in. It's the same kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah.
It was kind of like the same time as like the mob, like the Mac Oming Bendis thing that was going on. It just
like 2000, 2001.
Yeah, it was around 2000, 2001. And like there were just these points of light in the darkness on the internet. And there were just kind of, a lot of artists were just attracted to these portals. So But you know what? To Mike's question earlier is I don't know if it's exactly the same now. Like I don't know if you get fame off of Twitter the same way as you could from community. Like Lead Heavy or Artzilla or something like that,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing now. It's a hard thing now for me to be able to accurately answer because of I exist in a different space now that I understand that the 20 years that I've been doing stuff in Marvel and Image and all the stuff that I've done, it's not the same as somebody just coming up and starting an Instagram account and building it.
Yeah.
I had there was a built-in thing already that helped me go there. So
Yeah.
I understand that. So it's that I always try to be careful and not lay my experience and be like, well, hey, look at this. Look how easy it is. Just get in and post a thing and then it happens. I know, like I worked my butt off at another era that then seeded, like it just happened to be, I happened to be ready for it when this era happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I don't know how somebody, because I see some of these people, like I'm scrolling through, and the thing is these people blow me out of the water. Like these young artists today, because like you guys remember the days of getting in a car. Like I would get in a car. I lived in Bristol, Tennessee through high school. I would get in a car. I would drive to Asheville. I'd drive to Knoxville. I would drive all types with somebody to Charlotte just to go to bookstores in hopes that I would find an art book or like an art tutorial book. I didn't even know if it existed. I thought, well, there has to be new. There was no internet to go. Is there a book? I'm going to go to a place and see if there's a book that might teach me how to be better. That would sometimes waste 3 days, and I could not find a book. Now it's like, I want to learn how to draw everything on planet Earth. And they just have videos. They've got templates. They've got models built that they can download. They got brush packs. It's crazy.
Brush pack, yeah.
Yeah, I said that in the last 20 years, the how-to industry exploded, because that's when I started.
Oh, did he freeze? Hopefully he'll come back.
Oh, Mike's frozen. He's frozen in that zone.
Oh, and maybe he took off into space.
I was like, he is wearing a spacesuit tonight.
Hold on. I'm going to kick him. He might come right back. Hold on. There you go, Mike.
I was going to say, when I started draw, there were magazines for illustration and graphic design, but there was nothing about how to draw comics. And now there's a million things on how to draw. Like you said, anything. Right. You want to draw Disney princesses? There's like 50 people on YouTube saying, this is how you draw.
Right.
Mech, this is how you draw.
Right.
Although a lot of it's crap. And when you're first starting out, you have to learn how to, curate.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I imagine that's a hurdle now too, is like trying to figure out which places to learn from. But I think it's awesome to see how, I mean, it's awesome to see how quickly the young artists today are advancing at speeds in which I couldn't have done because I just didn't have the access to the stuff. So yeah, I don't know if it's the same. I don't know. That would be really interesting to like get a big group of those, like, the younger YouTubers who have 2 million followers, and like, how did that, I'm on the other side now. I'm like, I want to have a chat with you. Like what kind of like, cause I'm like an old school hustler. Like I sold tapes out of my backpack. You know what I'm saying? Like I used to in 5th and 6th grade, I rented my cassette tapes at school. I swear, like, because I was
open it up like here.
No, remember, because the old cassette tapes had like a suitcase or a briefcase. Remember, it looked like a briefcase. Yeah. So I bring a couple of those briefcases with me every day to school. I rented them because I was like, hey, I lived in a really small town, and I loved comics and I loved music. So I had a paper route, and I just spent my money on comics and music, and so I had a lot of tapes. And so I would bring and when video stores happened, because again, we're old enough to remember like VCRs and video stores just starting. And I was like, that's a good idea. Like they get money and then they borrow the tape and then they bring the tape back and then you get money again. So I had more tapes than everybody at my school in elementary school. So I started renting them out. So I get that, like, that's why I see some of these young YouTubers. I'm like, how did you get that many subscribers? That's crazy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a real thing and it happens, but it's just like, I don't know if it's the same thing as getting really good at playing Halo because you sat in your chair for 8 weeks straight just on the sticks, or if it's something else,
Well, that's also different too, because you have to figure out what percentage of those people are just casuals.
Right.
Because the others, like I teach a high school illustration class, comics, all that. And so I am always talking to the people that are like 14 to 18, right? And the 14 to 18-year-old today is different than the 14 to 18-year-old 5 years ago and 20 years ago.
Sure.
Right? And so now the 14 or 18-year-old today is different than the 14 to 18-year-old even 5 or 6 years ago, because the algorithms are feeding people things. So you go, like if I pay for content to promote content on Instagram, they ask you, who do you want to target? I can say, I want to target teenage boys, or I want to target women, or I want to target grandmas, or whatever, right? All the grandmas.
I'm really excited for whoever just now turned this on. Like he's like, I'm targeting boys and grandmas.
Right. You know, I know my audience. Right? But what I've noticed is if I track those numbers. Also, because of TikTok, now Instagram's changed its formula within the last month or and a half, because I have other friends who are going like, what the hell, man? Like, nobody is seeing my stuff anymore. They're wanting to get you to do the video. Right. So we're not putting up video, and I don't think you're putting up, but you're putting up your drawings, right? And
I'm trying. I don't know what any of this stuff. You're doing the reels now. I haven't learned that either.
Right. Yeah. So they're preferring that you do the reel of your drawing rather than post your drawing, because they're trying to compete with TikTok. So like the difference now, it seems to be to me, is that each platform has its own routine, right? So if you're there's some guys have gone over, like I think Hawthorne's on TikTok. Some people have moved over to TikTok. They're doing stuff on TikTok. Some people are on Instagram. Some people are just on Facebook, right? And some people are on YouTube. And so you go through all these different portals and go like, well, what do I have to do? Oh yeah, I have to do the secret knock over here and turn the crank this way over here. But no, over here, you can't do any knock. You don't even look them in the eye, and then they watch you. It's like all these different.
Yo, have you heard about the new thing? Have you heard about Clubhouse? Yo, it's so fresh. They don't even know. Nobody knows about it yet.
Clubhouse is a real thing?
Yeah, it's a real thing. So Clubhouse is this new, I think it's an app, I'm not exactly sure, where and somebody in the chat just talked about Discord. It's kind of like if anybody's been on Discord, and there is a channel where you could just talk to people. It's almost like being in a lobby and just there's people's voices. Like you're just talking at your computer and it's just people. I think they built the whole thing around this, and it's nothing but like blue check dudes on there, like directors and like the rich and famous. But that's like the next thing, because people are missing the conversational aspect of real life, where you could stand in a crowded room and like hug a red cup and talk to people, and there's noise all over the place. I think that's missing, and they're trying to create that. That's the new thing. You heard it here first.
Man, I got to figure out, like, I at some point I think I'm gonna have to like hire somebody on to like, so I could do one thing once and then have somebody disperse it because it's like I'm doing video, like I kind of get in the habit of recording out all my drawings now, and then I'll be like, at some point I'll talk about something and I'll make that a video, like, right? But like that same length can't be used for TikTok, even though I have an 11-year-old. I had him teaching me TikTok 2 weeks ago. Like he's telling me what to do, how to tag it. And I'm pretty good at this stuff, but I don't know anything about TikTok. And I'm like, I was like, what you're telling me, I got to make it this. And so I was like, I got to re-edit my video to get shorter. And like, and then Instagram and IGTV. And I know that Instagram, if you use IGTV, they're definitely going to they're going to put you in the system more. So then I was like, well, I've already got this YouTube content. I'll just swing this over to IGTV and start using that as well. But it's like, at some point, I gotta actually make content and not
exactly
not mess with the platforms to deliver. So I really was like, I'm getting to the place where I'm like, am I gonna have to like literally get like another person to just help be the in between the social media apps? You know,
one day you draw, and 6 days a week you spend all your time, doing,
I reel it, I club it, I talk it, I paste it, I face it, I book it.
I faced it, then I booked it.
I faced it, then I booked it. I tweeted it and twatted it.
I made $5.
I didn't mean that.
I made $5.
That was bad. No, that was bad. I was just making up words, and then I realized that is a word. I should have just said that.
That's a real thing.
Are you on ArtStation? Are you on ArtStation?
No, I don't think so. No. Well, I don't think so. No, I'm not.
Okay.
No.
Well, what for you is, who are you trying to reach, and what are you trying to reach them with? Because again, not all platforms fit with maybe what you're trying to do.
Instagram. So at first, Twitter seemed to be, when Twitter first came around, that seemed to be like, that worked for me. Like it was, that also kind of came around when my my oldest son was first born. And so I was, spending a lot of time rocking a baby and feeding a baby. So like you could rock a sleeping baby for a couple hours, and and iPhones had just come out too, right? So rocking a sleeping baby, I'm on the iPhone 1, like an iPhone 2, looking at Twitter. And so that's when I started doing like Q&As. And that's, that circles us back around to like tutorial stuff, right? Because all of a sudden everybody just wants to know how to do stuff. So I feel like when I started doing like a couple nights a week, these Q&As, my Twitter followers just exploded. Like, which I was super surprised about. That's my son right there.
I had to put him on screen.
What's up, Bax? That's my 11-year-old Baxter. Scorpiox.
I love it. Sounds like a Mortal Kombat character. I love it.
Right? That's his MC name.
Oh man.
So yeah, we he threw me off. Twitter. So Twitter at first was my jam, because I was like, this is easy. It's just this, and I'll post art and I'll do these Q&As. So that was it for the longest time.
I'm just gonna put this on quiet while you're talking. Go ahead.
So that was what I loved to do for the longest time, was Twitter. And I also liked it because at the same time, around 2010, I started doing my daily sketches and selling them each day. And Twitter was perfect for that, because everybody's watching. In the morning, I could finish it, post it, and then post the link to my store. And, when I had 15, 20, 30, 40,000 followers, these things were selling in minutes. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. Right. So that went on for years and years. And then around 2011 or 12 or something, Instagram came along. And a lot of my friends started, I got an account there really quick, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like that you couldn't have actionable content. Like, I got so used to Twitter being able to post links, where you could instantly link and get out of the app and go to a store and purchase things. And Instagram made it very difficult. Like, you had to, that whole link in my bio thing. Well, it's still that way. I mean, you still can't. Luckily now, people who follow me on Instagram are going to leave Instagram and go to the site. But at first it wasn't. It wasn't happening. Yeah. So I kind of was like anti-Instagram. Right. Because I was like, this is just posting stuff. I don't need to just post stuff. I need to sell stuff. Like, I need to make money.
And also the thing that I think that's changed a little bit is that you had to do it on your phone.
Right. But now, like, eventually, and I'll give all credit to Jake Parker on this, because Jake Parker jumped on Instagram, and he was on the Instagram train hard. And he and I would be on Skype while we worked. And I was always like, why do you like Instagram so much? And he was like, he'd explain it to me. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't click a store button. Like, I was like, right. And he was just like, and he was right. He had the long tail in mind, because at some point Twitter got, well, what Twitter is, right? It's just noise. And now everybody follows 100,000 people. So they rarely see your things. So I eventually started, when Tumblr was a thing, Tumblr Tumblr became my website. And so basically what I would do is post to Instagram, and Instagram would then siphon everything. It would just repost on all the other things, which I liked. Mm-hmm. Now, me doing that and posting a daily sketch every day on Instagram, at some point I clicked into the machine.
Yeah.
And my followers just exploded. So now I think I'm like 287,000 or something like that. Wow. So for me now, Instagram is probably like my central hub for communication with with the people that I want to speak to. And I think, you know, with the crowd that I want reading, that I think reads my books or wants to buy prints or buy art books or things like that. I think it's on Instagram. I understand that there's a whole world on YouTube, and I've ignored it for so long, and I'm kicking myself for it because I've had a channel forever. Yeah. And I just didn't have the time to dedicate to it. That you guys know, it's a lot of work.
Like, yeah, it is.
So yeah, Instagram, I think right now for me is where we do most of our heavy lifting, as far as just like where I post and where I think I have the most interaction with my crowd and things like that. And that's why I think I'm going to also try to figure out this IGTV thing is like parallel to the YouTube situation.
Scotty, I kind of have a segmented question. So kind of thinking about everybody who's listening and watching, we've hardly talked about sitting down and drawing. Right? We've been on here for almost 40 minutes. And we haven't talked about actually.
We're on pencil to pencil. We've not talked about pencils at all.
Right, we're talking about promo to promo. And I want to think about all of these other the variables of being a professional cartoonist in 2020. Almost like your stock portfolio, which is diversified, right? Mm-hmm. There's risk, there's all that other shit that's all tied into it. But it's just like a big pie. Yeah. In there is your actual time, like ass in the chair time. Yeah. And then the rest of that is promotion, sales, you know, running your shop, running your studio, in the car, getting coffee, all those other things. Mm-hmm. And what you've been talking about so far is a lot of promotion. And you know, you're a name, right? That's not a thing. At this point, everybody gets that. Right. So why do you hustle so hard? Because I think a lot of fans would just assume you just draw your books and just wait for the cash truck to show up. Right. So why do you hustle so hard, I guess is my question.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I mean, like, I said earlier, when I was younger,
hustler spirit.
I had a paper out at fourth grade on, so I had a job right away. And, I played basketball all my life growing up. And so that's a whole nother level of discipline and hustle and mastering of fundamentals that kind of go into the fabric of who somebody is. Mm-hmm. But also, I moved out pretty early in high school. I lived on my own in last couple of years of high school. And, so there was a need to work and pay bills and go to school and do the whole thing. So that was in there, but also I have never been arrogant enough to not watch history and I'm a huge hip hop fan and have been since I was a very young kid. And I would be watching a huge hip hop act and seeing where that group is 10 years later. I pay attention to that stuff. Like I paid attention growing up. Like, oh, they were the biggest thing for a hot 5 minutes or 5 years. And now you can't find them anymore. Or, growing up with somebody like Biz Markie, who you think would be like the most, like he had some of the biggest singles out when we were coming up. And then you realize like, well, then he was made of an example because of the sampling stuff, and that wiped his money out. But then he also wasn't hot anymore. Like, so, or people get big really quick and they stop hustling because they think that you're done. You've made it. Right. And in comics, it's especially that way. We all know, we've been in the conventions. We go to the conventions. I went to the conventions when I was 18, when I was 19, when I was 20. I'm 42 now. the same people aren't there. That's a lesson. You have to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
That's a lesson. Why aren't they there? Why wasn't some of the people that I was coming up with, why aren't they there? These are things. And so for me, it's survival.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I might be a big name now. I don't know what I'll be in 5 years. I don't know what I'll be in 10 years, but I have the energy right now to stack something up in case that ends up happening, and that way I can have some. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say the other thing is no one has more interest in you in your career than you.
Right. Yeah. And that's where it is I'm just, no matter what level no matter what level people perceive you at, we all know the reality behind the thing. It's like, there's no better illustration of what reality is. Redman is one of my favorite rappers of all time, right? There's no better illustration of what real life is than when they did MTV Cribs.
I saw that so many times.
Right. And they went to his apartment, his little townhouse, like his little duplex in Jersey. And it was a dump, like doorbell. And that was not a stunt. That was his place. And here's the thing. I watched him on an interview 2 weeks ago or a month ago. And they brought up the Cribs episode, and they were like, where are you living at now? He's like, I still live there. Like, This is Redman. Redman has had movies and TV shows, and he's had dozens of albums and all the success. That's our perception. So our perception is he should be this, this, and this, and this.
Right.
But he is aware. He still hustles to this day. He still makes mixtapes. He still does indie stuff. He was like, oh, Def Jam 101 Drive. I'm going to go out. I'll tour on my own. I'll do my own stuff. Because no matter what the perception is, there's a reality coming for all of us. So for me, I like making stuff. I like sharing the stuff that I make. And I like being in control of it. So there's a hustle there that says, man, I'd like to do this for as long as I can. And then kids come along and a family comes along. You're like, oh, I have to do this as long as I can. Right.
I was told several times this evening while I was messing with the snowblower outside, watch your hands.
Yes.
Don't put your hands in the snowblower. I'm like, I'm not trying to do that.
and touching on what we were talking about earlier. So when you got in, you knew there was a couple hundred people, maybe at the most, on any of those message boards.
Right.
Instagram is sort of like a message board now.
Yeah.
And there are hundreds of new people, probably artists every day. So the amount of people trying to break into the business that you knew was pretty finite because it was just Americans.
Right.
Occasionally, maybe somebody from Italy or Spain or from Brazil. Now it's literally everybody from 14 to 50 all over the world, all piling on. Some 12-year-old just got a thing today. They're going on, right? And 1,000 other 12 years old. So the churn in the last year on Instagram is just incredible because, and then you see all these good artists, like you were saying, here's the artist over here. Here's an artist. I remember the message board or the drawing board. That was the one that I was on the most. And,
that was Shane's Lines board, right?
Yeah. And there was a lot of industry pros like Shane and me and Paul Ravoche and Alberto Ruiz and
I love Alberto.
He's great.
So there was like a little phalanx of guys on there. But now by the time you get to know these people, there's a whole other. Oh, I'm following this guy today. I'm following this person. I'm following
and that's why I think it's so important to develop your own. At some point, whether it's something that you've done or it's just going to be time, everybody's going to fall out of favor with whatever I'm not even talking about just this business. If you're an executive at a company, at some point, somebody's going to come along and be the boss that doesn't remember you and you're not a part of their squad and you are phased out. The comic books are like that. At some point, I've been doing this 20 years now. At some point, all the people who I am at the top of their list are going to retire or move on or do something else. And the people replacing them, I'll be in the middle of the list, or I'll be at the end of the list. I'll shift down, and that's okay. That's how it should be. There should be new young blood. There should be new young hungry people coming. My hope is that I've done the work in the meantime for when that day comes. Hopefully I've chosen it and I have stepped off the stage, and I could say, open the door to my company and say, here's where I'm at now. You guys come on over here and let's play. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's really where the hustle comes from, is to I'm trying to beat the storm before it blows my house down. Right?
Yeah,
well, I've been doing it almost 40 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy,
right.
Mike. Yeah.
Right. And so
cheers, sir.
So I was just saying the other day that everybody that I worked with is basically gone except for maybe 3 or 4 people.
Right. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I talk with people who don't know my history. They might know my name. They have no idea of my history.
Right.
No idea what I've done.
Right.
And that person won't be there in 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There'll be another young person who goes, I don't know. I don't know John Byrne. I don't. In 10 years, they won't know Jim Lee. Right.
Oh, sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you are always, I always tell people, you as an artist are in charge of managing your own career, because if you rest on your laurels and think the company is always going to be like, oh yeah, Mike, sure, Scotty, yeah, go to our green room. You are who? What?
Yeah.
You drew what?
Yeah.
What? No, I never watched those shows as a kid. I never read those comic books as a kid. And that's what will eventually happen. You'll meet people who remember everything, and your what you did was your childhood, and then you'll meet other people who are like, no.
Oh yeah. Oh, listen, it's already happened happening for me, where I got these young artists being like, oh my God, I've been like, they're doing variant covers at Marvel now, like being like, oh, I've been looking at your stuff since I was in elementary school. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, oh, it's happening. Like, and what they're really saying is, I'm about ready to eat you for lunch, son.
Right. You were like, just for men, son. Hold on a second.
That's right.
Yeah.
And and I always think of almost the alternate of what you're saying, Scotty, is doing the show circuit and being there, and after a while you start to see people fall off. And then the other thing that scares me is the old guy that's sitting there at the show, which kind of scares me in a different way.
And that's kind of what I was saying the first time, is that when you walk by and you go, 10 years ago, this guy had a line around the block. And now
now it gets wheeled in.
Yeah, now but what's worse is this stuff, they're not even at that age yet. But you could now you could just roll up, and there's one person at a time. You could chat for an hour, and that's okay too. This isn't, I'm not dissing any of that.
No.
It's just saying, like, they're just like anybody in any industry, you have to plan for your future. You have to plan. I mean, look at what we've been through this year. Like, talk about having plans and contingency plans and backups. I mean, nobody could predict what we just have been going through and what we're still going through. Mm-hmm. So this is a prime example of, like, how many, there's the saying, like, what you want as many legs under your table as there can be, right? Because you don't ever want that table. You don't want a table with 2 legs, because if you lose one leg, that table's falling over. 4 legs is pretty good. If you give me about 10, 15 table legs, that table's probably never going to fall over.
Yeah, I need mad legs on my table.
Yeah, I just want nothing but legs.
Yeah.
Look at that leggy ass table. That is a leggy ass table.
All the legs.
We all know people that were what I call like the weekend warriors, like 3, sometimes 4 weekends a month. They were doing a con, and that's how they made their living.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys that used to be like mainstream inkers were getting a book or 2 a month. They've transitioned out of that, but now they're going to conventions, signing books. They got prints. They got.
Well, honestly, the convention circuit for me is what the conventions coming along when they did, because back when we first started, right, there was Chicago, San Diego, and then a couple small ones, right? Like Heroes or like Mid Ohio Con. Like there was some small satellite cons, but there was really only 2 big ones in the US. Then Toronto kind of came along too, right? Fan Expo up there, but there was like Chicago and San Diego. That was convention season. Remember when convention season was a thing? It was like you went to Chicago and then 2 weeks later you went to San Diego, or vice versa. San Diego would be first and Chicago would be in August. Yeah. That was your summer, right? When Wizard World started peppering, and Wizard World Philly was a huge deal for me. That was one of the first Wizard World Philly. That first year they had it, we drove there. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first years that I like hustled at a con, and I walked away with like more money than I had made at a con ever. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being like, oh, okay, there's a new plan happening here. Right. Because for those, like, what's funny now is like a lot of people go like, oh yeah, well, you say that now because you're you. But I'm like, you didn't know what it was like from 2001 to 2010. If you drew cartoony in that era, you were a pariah. Like, because this is the era of Brian Hitch and Alex Maleev and these brilliant realistic artists that just were awesome. But that's what people were looking for back then. That they wanted comics that looked like Ultimates. They wanted comics that looked like Daredevil. That's what was happening.
They wanted real comics.
Right.
Just real.
Right. So I was going through, like, I came in at the death nail of the Joe Mads and the cartoony era where, like, right, like it was all of a sudden it's like if you had a spot already, it was yours. Mm-hmm. But they were not rewarding new people that came from that era in the news. So it was very difficult. And when the convention era came along and Wizard World started having shows everywhere, I went to them all. Mm-hmm. And once I started being able to make money at those, then I was able to make better decisions that fit me on the job side. Mm-hmm. So if a job came along that I didn't fit me, I had enough money to say no to it. Which then ended up leading me to being able to get an exclusive. But everything started working because I felt like I had control rather than just having to say yes to anything and being desperate and
Yeah, having options changes everything.
100%.
So now I'm very interested in this timeline because there was also the era that there was a Tokyo Pop. There was a lot of manga coming in. Right. There was a new era of readers. Mm-hmm. The kids were not bringing a little shopping cart behind them with the books in it.
No.
Right. The era of the Borders girl. When you were going to Borders, it'd be like all these women reading comics. Right. So were you finding that was the people that were also coming to because to them, cartooning was not a bad word.
Right. Well, what was weird about that time was Marvel and all the companies were trying to chase that trend, but they didn't necessarily know how to do it. Right. They were seeing a lot of market share go to Tokyo Pop, a lot of market share go to like more shelf space. Those 4-foot sections at Borders and Barnes & Noble were going way more to manga at that era. Yeah. I actually benefited. That's how I got in. Is Marvel was trying to chase that. So they were like, well, you look different than that. Like, you don't look like John Byrne. You look closer to that. Even though I was not a manga kid. I didn't read manga. I wasn't a kid. I just had no access to it growing up. Like, I had watched Ninja Scroll and Akira like any other kid who had a Blockbuster membership. But I didn't really know manga. But they tried to kind of categorize me as that at the beginning. So that's where my door was. But once they realized that they were having a hard time grabbing those dollars. Yeah. They kind of shut that door. And that's when I started like kind of zigzagging, trying to find my spot. Where all of a sudden I'm finding myself drawing. And again, here's the other thing. I actually didn't know who I was either. Like, this isn't me putting it all in the company. I was a young kid. Right. Who hadn't figured out how I even draw yet. Like, I still was like, well, I draw hands like him, and I draw eyes like him, and I draw buildings like him. I still, my table was still filled with everybody else's books. Mm-hmm. So when I ran across the thing, I'm like, oh, how does Umberto draw noses? How does Chris draw? So I was still in that zone. So it was like a melting pot of all that. But I do think that once the convention scene started, I was definitely getting more women, family, and kids coming by my table because of the kind of stuff that I like to draw. It wasn't so straight up superhero stuff. It was a little bit different. And I just held on long enough that, you know, when the Oz books came along and I started doing the Wizard of Oz books with Eric Schanauer, that changed my life. Like, that changed everything. And it also coincided with an era of the family coming to conventions. And because of that, you started seeing moms and kids and girlfriends where like they're like, all of a sudden, like the cute stuff or kitty stuff was like kind of in. And I think that we had done a big 10 years of dark, gritty comic book material. And I think we were starting to see, like, I think people want a little bit of another thing. Or at least we're not replacing things, but we can open up the categories now and do a lot of stuff.
Right. Yeah. I also think that the era of the grim and gritty, it becomes such a parody, and the young kids coming in, that just didn't appeal to them because that's not what they would see on TV either. They were not seeing that on Cartoon Network
I think what we saw was the rise of we saw the rise of the people who started having the spending dollars were the kids who came up playing Final Fantasy and came up playing, you know, the Nintendo 64 and GameCube versions of Zelda. So that kind of cartooning, we just had to wait for the people who grew up with the cartooning stuff again to have the spending dollars. Right. And so, like, I just luckily held on. I mean, like my little Marvel covers, the baby covers or whatever everybody calls them. The funny thing about that is a year before I did those, no, what was it, 2012? 2 years before Marvel Now, where I did the Avengers versus X-Men, like the 30 characters. 2 years before that, I did the exact same kind of covers for an X-Babies miniseries. Nobody cared. Like exact same. And everybody's like, cool, that's cute. Cool. Peace out. 2 years later, I do that cover. It sells a quadrillion copies. And now almost 9 years later, I've done like 500 of those covers. Like, I've done more of those than Garbage Pail Kids, right? Like, I'm like, so it's like, you never know. It's dumb luck. It's timing. It's the world's ready for it. They're not ready for it. It's like, that's why I hustle too. Cause you never know like when something's off and when something's going to be on again, you know?
You know, we don't talk enough about the longevity of cartooning or being a cartoonist. And I mean, it's real itchy to talk about your legacy and longevity and, you know, are you going to be relevant? And things like that. But I think it's really important to air things like this out because we all have those fears, right?
100%.
Yeah. All that stuff is really fantastic to talk about. And I wanted to talk about a little bit the variances in your mainstream work and some of your indie work or even your self-published stuff or creator-owned stuff. I remember when the Oz stuff came out, and like I agree with you, everything just like blew open. The doors blew open when you started doing those Oz books. And then what happened after that? When did Fairyland start?
So Oz we did for 5 years. We did 6 volumes of that, and we were on that for about 5 years. And that was an amazing era in my career because it was the first experience that I had with not having, well, I'm going to say this and it's going to be not true, but I was young enough to be arrogant enough to not feel like I needed to live up to, I wasn't a part of that Oz community. Right. I understood. I've seen the movie a million times and I read the first book. That's it. Like that's as much as I knew about Oz. And I liked it. It was great. I was more of an Alice in Wonderland person. And I loved stuff like that. But so for me, there wasn't this legacy stuck on my head. Like a lot of comic book artists who get into comic books, right? Like they've read all the comic books. So when they first draw Spider-Man, they almost can't draw their own Spider-Man. Right. They have to, they feel beholden to live within the boundaries of the 40, 50, 60, 70 years that these characters have existed. Yeah. I was a little arrogant punk ass kid who was like, whatever, I'm just going to draw it. And so the cool thing about the Oz was when they offered me that job, I did turn it down for a while because I was like, this is a terrible idea. Even though I would rather do this than draw fill in the blank superheroes.
Yeah.
For me, because I like this kind of stuff. I'm a Mad Magazine guy. Mm-hmm. I'm a fairy tales guy. That's where my head is. Mm-hmm. But I got a job drawing superheroes at Marvel, so I thought that's what I needed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when ultimately when we started, and I knew that I had the freedom to draw however I wanted and however I envisioned it, it was 5 years of really just exploring art again. Mm-hmm. With no feelings that I needed to land inside of a box. The great thing was I didn't look at the artwork. I wasn't using like the old artwork from the Oz books as my template. Mm. I actually read Eric is an Oz. He's like the modern day Oz encyclopedia. He is the master, right? Like when there's documentaries, Eric's a part of them. Mm-hmm. So when I would get his scripts, I would read them, and I was trying to just interpret what L. Frank Baum and Eric were putting on the thing, and then I had to think about what I thought that was, right? So like for example, when Dorothy, the way that they drew Dorothy in the book, they had emerald glasses. Mm-hmm. But the way that L. Frank Baum and Eric describe it is that there were glasses with blinders on the side and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, those are goggles. Mm-hmm. Like what they're describing here is goggles. Mm-hmm. So I interpreted it that way. I wasn't a slave to this or a slave. I was like, oh, let's interpret it like this. So being able to spend 5 years at Marvel, like getting paychecks and really explore how I drew naturally, mm-hmm. was invaluable. It was crazy. It was awesome. It was like I found myself. I found who I was, and it, the book sold. Like at the time, what people don't realize is we were outselling the biggest superhero titles at the time, but we were just doing it in bookstores.
Yeah.
So it wasn't getting talked about on Newsarama in the same way that mm-hmm. Civil War was or whatever. But I remember Ed Brubaker being like, dude, every time we have a Marvel retreat, all they talk about is how good your books are beating our books. Like, and I was like, that's dope. I like that. But so doing those books for that kind of opened up who I was as an artist. So when it came time to end those, I just sat with CB and he was like, well, what do you want to do next? Because those books did well enough that was the conversation now. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking what can I do next. They were asking me what I wanted to do next. Mm-hmm. And that's when I said, I don't actually know that I can go back to drawing, like X-Men or Spider-Man. I don't know that I don't know that that's what I do now. Mm-hmm. And not in the way that I would have to do it to draw on Spider-Man, right? So I remember Marvel had called me and asked me to Joe and Dan Buckley called me up, and Brian Bendis had mentioned maybe me coming on and doing a run, like an arc on Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. So Guardians of the Galaxy had just launched. The movie wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
It wasn't even news yet. But Steve McNiven and Brian Bendis had just launched Guardians of the Galaxy. And it was a big hit. And Sarah Pacelli had come in right after McNiven. Steve had done it. And Sarah's amazing. And they were like, Brian would kill. Brian wanted to kill to have you come on and do an arc. And I was like, that just does not make any sense. I just came off of a fairy tale book for 5 years, and Steve McNiven and Sarah Pacelli have helmed this book. It doesn't make sense for me to follow those two. Like I would be crucified. Hey, I don't know that I could draw that book that way anyway.
Right.
And because of the combination of things that we've been talking about, like at this point, I'd been selling daily sketches every day for years. The conventions were still a big thing. So I had a whole side hustle that on top of my Marvel job that had everything working for me at all times. So when these conversations happened, I had time to be able to think about it, assess it, talk it over with my wife, talk it over with friends, and make a solid decision based on what I need my life to be 5 years down the road. I'm a 5 years down the road kind of person. So I was like, I don't think that makes sense. But the one thing that I know that I want to do from now on is I want to write my own stuff. Like I always wanted to write my own comics. I think it's time now. I've been at this for a while. I had started writing some mini things while I was doing Oz, some short stories. I wrote a Magneto mini series. So I had started the writing stuff and I was kind of okay at it, but I was like, I think from now on, I want to write and draw my own stuff. So that's one. I said, I don't think it makes sense for me to do Guardians with Brian, but I would absolutely take Rocket and Groot. I would take those two characters and separate them, and I could write and draw the heck out of something like that. And that to me was the middle ground between what Oz was, like where I felt comfortable, and what Marvel needs me to be, because they're still like a action super. I mean that they're still Marvel comics, right? Yeah, it's still my home. So I understand that. I'm not going like, well, this is who I am now, and you got to let me do this. So I was like, I think that that's a smart move right there. Like, let's take this. And they were like, had a few chats, came back, and they're like, great idea, let's do it. So I got Rocket and Groot was my next project. I got invited to the Marvel Writer Retreats. I pitched it. It went over well. We did it. Now here's where the beauty happened. I had taken long enough. Oz was still going when I was pitching all this, so we were still finishing Oz. So I couldn't quite start on Rocket and Groot until I was finished with that stuff. So we were running a little bit behind of where we wanted to be with Rocket and Groot. So by the time I actually was ready and going, and we got it on the schedule, the first issue comes out on the day that the movie was released. So I didn't have any while we were, so the 2 years previous to that I had pitched it, I knew nothing about the movie. Like, I mean, we knew that there was gonna be a movie made, but Chris Pratt, we didn't know the Chris Pratt part of it yet. We didn't know any of that stuff yet. And people were still kind of like, Guardians of the Galaxy? That's the next Marvel movie? Like,
right. Yeah, there was that period of time where people were like, who?
Yeah.
So hard to believe that now.
When the movie came out, and our comic came out the same week, and here's the other perfect storm, Loot Crate had just started, and we were the first comic book to be in Loot Crate. So Rocket Raccoon #1 sold about 450,000 copies, which was a lot of comic books. Right?
A lot of books. Yeah.
So, like, I think that year I had the #1 comic of 2014 until Spider-Man, one of the big numbers. I can't remember, 800, 500, whatever. One of the Spider-Mans came along, and of course, Dan Slott and Umberto just wiped like the street with me. Yeah. But so there was just, I mean, I talked about it earlier. Like, there's a lot of things where you're just like, be prepared when things like right time, right place, dumb luck. Yeah. Didn't realize it was going to happen. So Rocket Raccoon and Groot was right after that. So I wrote and drew that. Then as I started to want to do creator-owned stuff, I transitioned off the art side, and I just kept writing Rocket Raccoon. And I brought in a lot of, that's where this is one of my favorite times, because then I got to bring in new blood to Marvel. So everybody who followed me on the art side was almost new hires at Marvel. I brought in a lot of new cartoonists to come on, like Aaron Conley came on and did an issue with me. I brought Jake Fosgate over and did an issue with me. Felipe Andrade was already there, but I brought him on to do some stuff. He was amazing. So it's really fun to be able to transition into that. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I could, and then while I did that is when I launched I Hate Fairyland. So it really was time for me to just like, I had always wanted to do, I always thought I was going to do creator-owned comics. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then I got a job at Marvel, and I was there. So everything kind of had led to a place where financially I was able to do it. I was able to take a break and go make a comic book without getting paid. That's another thing that people don't realize a lot with independent comics, man. When you step out on that ledge, I mean, you're not making any money for a while.
You don't know whether you'll make any of your money back.
Yeah, it's scary. So I got myself to a place financially that I could float for a while and make the book, but I really needed that book to work to make it to line everything up. So that was kind of the transition after Oz, and how I kind of harnessed the wind that Oz created in the sail that I kind of sewed together to kind of breeze me through until where we are now.
One of the things I think that I found really interesting when you started this last bit of the discussion was that you said to yourself, where do I want to be in 5 years? And most most artists don't think that, because one of the things that happens, I think very much more with your guys' generation, people think about that. But originally your goal was to get into Marvel, get on a book, and ride the horse, because that was was when I got in. You wanted to be like Gil Kane or John Buscema or John Byrne. Yeah. That was the goal. You got on a book, and then you rode every month, because that's what was being a comic book artist at that time, right? Right. Because you didn't have Dark Horse, you didn't have a lot of people doing independent stuff. In the late 70s, early 80s, you could do an independent comic and make absolutely $0 with it, right? Now, by the time you were ready and you started thinking, all these other things had started lining up. So that's what I call a preparation meeting opportunity, which is what some people say is luck. Yeah. But if you're also not prepared and you don't think about it, you won't take advantage of that opportunity.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And there was also, I think observation is a really, really, really big. I mean, it's funny, right? Because the thing that makes us good artists is observation and memory, right?
Right.
We all have hands. And we all have access to pencils and paper. So technically we should all be able to do the same things with those tools. But really what it comes down to is like, I don't know that I've ever sat and studied what a fire hydrant looks like. But if you tell me to draw a fire hydrant, for some reason, I remember I observed it once and I locked it in my memory, right? Well, I think it's the same way when you start observing things like the technical aspects of the industry. I think it's as important to study that as it is how to draw perspective. In fact, I know less about perspective than I do how to stay alive as a businessman. But it's when I started to notice what was happening over the course of the 20 years that I've been doing this. When I first got when I got offered a book, it was my book. There was only fill-in artists if I asked for a break, or if I messed up and they had to bring in somebody.
Right.
But if I got hired on a book, until I chose to leave it or ask for a break, it was my book. I was the artist on said title. And when I started to notice the industry shifting to double shipping, here's the thing. I need to add this on because I don't want it to sound like I'm not disparaging how things have went. It's also because artists leveled up so hardcore that it takes them, like Jerome Opeña is one of the dopest artists I've ever seen. He can't produce that art in 30 days, right? Like it's not possible. And when you have the kind of artists that we started having on these books, there was no other choice but then to say like, okay, you're doing these 3 issues. This artist is going to do these 3 issues, and this artist is going to do these 3 issues, and then cycle back, right? What I noticed right away was, wait a minute, I can do math. I'm not great at math, but I can do a little math. And what that means is I'm going to be on the shelves for these 3 months. Then I'm going to be off shelves for 6 months. Then I'll be back on the shelves for 3 months and 6 months. And what that does is it make a retailer forget who I am. And retailers are our audience. I know we all think readers are, but if you are in the comic book business and you're in the business of selling comic books, the retailer is your customer, right? Yeah. And if I'm not keeping in mind how I stay relevant to that to those awesome retailers at those stores and those online businesses, then I'm not thinking about this business as a 3D object. I'm thinking about it very 2D. And that's where I started to realize, like, I'm going to have to figure out a lot of ways to subvert where everything is right now. Because I'm not as good as Jerome Pena, and I'm not a Steve McNiven level artist. Like, that's not what I do. I'm a Sergio Aragonis guy. Like, I want to scribble some stuff and make you laugh and have some fun. But I got to figure out a way that I can survive with that and stay relevant to those things. So sometimes accidental things happen. I mean, when I did the first Marvel Baby covers, that one for the Avengers versus X-Men, no idea that would have taken off. I thought I had one job. I was going to do one cover and never do it again. And they're like, "Oh my God, this sold a lot. You want to do 10?" I was like, "Did you just offer me 10?" I'm not kidding you. This is 8 years ago. I was like, "Did you just offer me 10 covers at once?" And they're like, "Yeah." My Siri, my watch is just talking to me now. It's like, seriously, did you just offer me 10 covers at once? And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "This is crazy." And then I'd do 7 of them, and they'd offer me 5 more, and I'd get there and they'd offer me 10 more. And all of a sudden I realized, like, I have covers booked out a year and a half from now. Like, and I've been doing that now for 8 years. I backed into that. That was an accidental thing. But like you said, preparation meets opportunity. That's luck. You grab it and you ride that horse and you keep going. Those are the kind of things that you're like, "Oh, cool." And then you start learning, like, oh, now retailers see me weekly. I'm not even on a monthly plane anymore. I'm on a twice a week plane because of the way the math is working out. And so that's where I was like, oh, I now realize you have to stay relevant to that group of, with the purchasing power. It's a weird system.
Yeah. And even out of that month, I always say, when you think about it, it's 1 week, because next week your covers.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And then it's somewhere else in the store. So only the casual browser or the guy with the pull box will actually see your work, because there'll be the new comics. And actually of that week, it's about 3 days from Wednesday to Saturday. So Wednesday to Saturday, it's like, all you, here I am. I'm doing what's happening.
I mean, there was definitely a little window there where I was like, hoping that, like these 2 or 3 or 4 hot podcasts would just talk about my books when they would come out, because I was like, that would extend my life for a week, right? Because the books come out on Wednesday, but then they do the podcast on Friday, and then that podcast for previous week comes out on Monday, and I'm like, oh, cool, I extended my life by 5 days.
It's like oxygen. You get a line of oxygen. You got to keep it in the tank.
But nobody's thinking about that when you're thinking about, like, I got to learn how to draw hands, or I got to look. That other part of your brain as an artist that's consumed with learning how to draw or tell a story has to also marry with the economic real and the changing dynamics of the business, which no one ever educates you about.
Well, that's the thing is, there is no template in our world, right? There is no solid cartoonist template. I've said this a lot, and I talked about it in one of my previous videos, but I've always talked about it on panels with CB. CB Sobalski would always say, like, breaking into comics is like breaking out of prison. Like, once somebody finds a way, that way is closed. You got to find another way. And I like that analogy, but I added to it and said, I think breaking into comics is closer to it's like breaking out of prison. That's the easy part. Staying out of prison is the hard part. And staying in comics, breaking into comics is as easy as getting one job. Staying in comics is the hard thing, right? Like, staying out of prison, you got to figure out, like, how am I going to pay for things? Like, I can't have a bank account. I got to do it. I got to get a fake name. I got to get a new identity, which is our branding, right? We got to create an identity. We got to create, we've got to go out and create a brand new human. We exist, but we don't exist. So we have to create a new human for the world to see. And we have to make that human relative. So I was like, I get that analogy, but I think that it's more like, if I break out of prison, how do I stay in it? If I break into comics, how do I stay in it? This is a weird job. This is a weird job that changes daily, yearly, It's a bizarre situation, and then, I mean, somehow we've survived the digital age where we're still making print comics, which I can't believe.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, we talk about that all the time on the podcast, and one of the things as a teacher, I've been teaching about 20 years. What I would tell somebody in 2000 is not what I would tell somebody in 2010, which is not what I would tell somebody now, even within the last 4 or 5 years. Now I tell people, do webtoons, do a webcomic, get your work out there. Everybody can see your work. Nobody's going to say, well, there's an order minimum. You can't, if you don't meet the minimum, we're not going to carry your book. All those hurdles that existed for the previous generations, or just like when I started, you would get an annual, you get a backup, you get an 8-page story, and you do that, and then that would be your job. And then they say, okay, well, you can draw this other 8-page story, or you do that whole Pangea is that's totally gone. And even the Pangea of 5 years ago, your Pangea is totally gone now.
Oh yeah, no, breaking into, I did a video a couple weeks ago on this, and I said breaking into comics. This is how you break into comics now. Make a comic. That's it. Make a comic, post it on any of the billion ways that we have now to share comics. Webtoons Webtoons is crazy awesome, right? You've got this situation that they give you some money to make your own comic, and you sign a deal for a little while, and the rights are there, but then after a certain time, it all reverts back to you, and it's exposed to millions and millions of people. It's really, really great, and that's why I'm not a part of that machine right now. Who knows? I don't know. In 10 years, I might need to be. I might need to do that. Or maybe I'll make mine. I'll be the next Webtoons. I don't know. But that's the fun thing about everything right now. Is back in the day, we had to find an editor's email, right? And be like, will you like me?
Will you read my script? And nobody wants to read a script. They can look at the art and go, okay, but somebody's going, I got to read this script, and this is about, some X-Men. I feel bad for people who want to write, because I always tell them the main thing to do is get somebody to draw your story, because they'll read it once it's a comic book.
That's it. That's it right there. Yeah. It's listen, I want to give everybody a chance. Like I said, when I started doing Rocket Raccoon, I was well, I mean, we could get a bunch of people who already work at Marvel, but I'd rather reach over and grab some friends who haven't done it yet. And let's do it. Let's go have some fun and pew, 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 and play pretend. Right. But writing, even when it was hey, I got a script, I'm I don't know what. I barely know how to read. I don't know.
You're asking way too much of me.
Yeah.
And you learn to make comics by making comics.
Yeah, dude. I mean, listen, I was terrible at making comics when I made my first comics. And that's not me being faux humble. I'm not being oh, shucks, I'll suck. I'm no, I just did not know how to do it. I totally said, yes, I do know how to do it. I lied. And I was I am faking this until the fake it till you make it era saved my life.
But you also didn't crash and burn, because other people... That's also that barrier you go through, where you want the opportunity and then you get it, and then you're do you drop the ball, or can you force yourself to work through that part that's uncomfortable?
Sure,
I don't like this part.
That's what I do, man. I would draw some Human Torch pages and then just cry. I'm not kidding you. I'm not even. I mean, I'm not even I'm not even being funny. I would straight up cry that night. I had something in my head. I do not physically know how to make it happen the way that I needed it to happen. So I finished this, and it's not good, but I'm which is terrible now, because 20 years later that I'm a name, they republish all that shit. And, they keep putting it back out in new collections. I'm no.
The ghost of jobs past.
Yes.
Scotty, how you doing? How you feeling, bro?
I'm good. I'm probably gonna make it to a restroom break though.
All right.
Is that cool? Is that a thing you guys do on Pencil to Pencil?
We've done it once in a while. So why don't you go? Do you pay the water bill, and we'll line up some of these questions, and when you come back, we'll do a lightning round. All right.
Perfect. I love it.
All right. Sounds good.
But we could actually, if we want to ask, there's some questions in the room we could look at.
Yeah. I want to set up a lightning round. There's been a lot of questions going on, and I want to just maybe string some together for Scotty. There was one that was pretty good that maybe we can touch on while he's doing his thing. Mike, Eddie Nichols, who's watching from England, cheers, says, question for Scotty, and this is for Scotty, but I think we can all talk about it. Talking about how comics have changed in regards to audiences and style from the 90s to the aughts to now, what major ways do you feel the industry and job will change in decades to come? Thanks, Eddie.
I think technology and how people access their entertainment is going through a fundamental change. The other thing that I think is really different is a lot of what drove comics probably up until about 10 or 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, was that people collected things, physical things, and they like to have all their issues of, their boxes full of comics. And I think a lot of the people that are coming in and enjoying comics, like, you don't collect a webtoon, right? You can love a webtoon, and you could love 50 webtoons, right? You could have all 900 chapters of a webtoon, but it's not like in your house. It's not like and it doesn't have value in the same way that I had when I came up. And a lot of the people that are fans of my work, and even up to, like I said, like probably people that are fans of Scotty's stuff when he started, where there was like, you liked it, you had a physical thing, which also had a sense of value and worth to you. And now you have a lot of people that love something, but it's on the internet, and you're never going to have to go and download my webtoon if I do it. Right. You know what I mean? It'll always be up there on a server for you to see. So I think, hopefully, right. But what I'm saying is I think that changes people's relationships to the work, because part of the relationship for my generation and most of the generations, like I said, even your guys, was you would find that comic, and then you had the issue in between that you had to go hunt for. And then you would spend time, and you have to spend money, and then you had this sense of satisfaction from your collection. Now, if you love webtoons, you don't have that. Your relationship to the image, to the story, is not invested in an actual physical thing. And I noticed with my students, that's what I was interested in talking to them about, and getting their opinion and how they feel about reading stuff. So I think you have a lot of people that are, it's kind of like how comic strips were. You read Peanuts, but it just went in the trash, right? And then later on, there was a book that collected those strips. Right? That's a different mentality than what the direct market was built on.
I love it. Scotty, you want to touch this question real quick?
I agree with Mike there. I think that we went from I think that the way that the biggest change that I have noticed is the collectible side of it, which is, I grew up reading Calvin and Hobbes and Peanuts and Mad Magazine. I read them as the content was important to me, not the item. My Mad Magazines were beat to shit. Like, I read through those things so hard, like, and I took them everywhere I would move, and I didn't know what magazine boxes were, or like, I didn't have any, but because I didn't have a collector mentality. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's not how I thought of things. I just cared about the content. Like, I liked watching movies. I didn't care about the physicality of the VHS tape or the cover or anything like that. So I think that's a very different ball game now, where, it's a little bit of both. Like, we still have the content, but on top of that, we're still thinking about the collectability of it. And listen, I'm aware of that because I'm a part of that with, being the variant cover king. There's I'm very much a part of that culture without even realizing that I became a part of that culture. So I think that's a big thing, but that also, I don't hate on that, because it engages a whole other, that's as an important part of the audience as the person who just likes to read it. Like, it's kind of the weird, beautiful thing about our crazy, nerdy subculture that we're all a part of and love, is that there's space for all of us, right? There's space for us Mad Magazine heads. There's space for us Jeff Darrow's crazy heads. There's space for the people who just want to collect the 9.8 CGC slabs. There's space for all of us, and we all respect those boundaries, and we all respect that. I'm going to give you your space too. Like, you can come on. You like I love that about where we are now. That's another big thing that's changed, right? Like, we like right now, when you tell people you make comics, they like back in the day, like when we all started, if you tell people you make comics, they're like, there's money in that. You want to get a, I have family members that be like, you gotta, but like, where do you make your money though? Like, what do you
really do?
Right, yeah. What do you really do? You know, or like, you know, like go back further than that. It was not cool to read comics. Like, you know, if you wore your X-Men shirt at school, like you were being extra, like you were like, you know what I'm saying? Like like that was not cool for us. Like now I can't leave the house. Like I went to pick up my kid at school and the car in front of me had a Deadpool sticker that I drew on the back. Like that's how ubiquitous comics have become now with just everyday life.
I would say that the geek culture has become mainstream culture.
Right. Which that is awesome. Like it's given, I mean, and now it's like, if people ask what I do and I tell them, they're almost like, oh, like they think like and I'm like, well, slow down. I'm not Tom Cruise. Take it down a notch. Like,
I'm Tom Cruise and Stan Lee mixed together.
Where were these people 20 years ago? Right.
Right.
When I couldn't get a sandwich at Subway. Where were they at?
Right. Exactly.
All right, Scotty, we're going to hit the lightning round. There's been There's been a lot of people who've been asking some really good questions. I'm going to try to get through some, so I'm not asking you to be, brief, but we can try to touch as many as we can.
They're not yes/no answers.
Yes. No. Continue.
I'll just nod or shake.
Some of these kind of double up on each other. Our good friend Roger Ash, hey Roger, says, for Scotty, as an animation fan, I gravitate towards more cartoony art. Did animation influence you at all? And our friend Gar asked the same question. Do you have favorite animators? So maybe you can pick both.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think animation was such a big part of my life. The Disney block of cartoons, Tailspin, DuckTales, Darkwing, even Gummy Bear, like that whole Chippendale Rescue Rangers, like that whole Disney block. I forget, it was a Disney Afternoon. It was called something. It was a Disney block of cartoons. That was a big part of my childhood. I mean, as well as, I said, I am the exact age that watched Ninja Turtles and watched Thundercats and had and Silverhawks and Tiger Sharks and the whole nine, right? Like, so that whole era, Beetlejuice, that Saturday morning cartoons were literally made for for our block. So I grew up, that's all I cared about, for sure. So that's what bled into Mad Magazine, because when I discovered Mad Magazine latched onto popular culture and did satire parody of it. So when I would go see Roger Rabbit, or when The Simpsons came out, or Turtles, then the place that I could get more of that was Mad Magazine, and it was drawings. So like the combination of these two things was, here's motion drawings, and then Mad Magazine is static drawings of it. So I learned from that. So yeah, animation was such a big part of my life. It probably wasn't until Tarzan came out that I knew to pay attention to an animator, and that was Glenn Keane. Now later in life, now I'm well versed on the 9 Old Men, and Frank and Ollie are just absolute gods among cartooning and just geniuses, and touched almost every important animated figure that we've liked. But Glenn Keane was the first one that I actually knew a name, because he did Tarzan, and he did Beast for Beauty and the Beast, and he did Ariel and Little Mermaid. So like he's got a huge legacy, right? He's the modern day 9 Old Men. Right. But I will say that there was one thing when I broke into comics, when I was sitting in our little apartment in Chicago, when a movie came out on DVD. So when DVDs first started having special features, The Atlantis. Do you guys remember Disney's Atlantis?
Yeah, Mignola.
Mignola did a lot of designs for that, and Peter Chung. And when that DVD came out, they had a second disc that was just a special features. It was a special edition, and it had a 2-hour making of. And that I watched that thing. I'm not kidding you. I didn't go to college. I think that making of was my college because it was 2 hours of artists talking about reasons why they designed it like this, why this was this, why the hands were this, why the way. There was the lead animator for Milo, the main character, which my youngest son's name is Milo. The lead animator for Milo in that movie said something that I have carried with me for 20 years. And he said, when you're designing a character, I sit down at my drawing table, turn the phone. All right. He goes, there was no phone to turn off. He said, I take the phone off the hook. Right. He said, I take the phone off the hook. I turn the lights off, turn the drawing light on, and I start moving my pencil. And all I'm thinking about is movement and mass. Movement and mass. And I was like, what? And that statement, those two words, movement and mass, it changed everything on how I thought about what a drawing was. Because before I thought about drawings as lines and the shapes and style and trying to think of something. And then when he said movement and mass, and it showed all his gesture drawings and what weight meant and how like things, gravity pulls down on a character or clothing or anything, I was like, oh. And that 2-hour documentary was filled with little gems like that anytime that I was just drawing for hours, I would put it on and sometimes just press it on repeat. And it would just play and then start back and play and start back because I was just listening. It's kind of what podcasts are now. They didn't have podcasts yet, but it's like, it's hearing artists talk about what the decisions they're making and some of the wrong decisions they made and some of the right decisions they made and why things like, yes, animation, to answer that question, animation has probably been more influential to me than anything else.
It's a great answer.
Right.
Mike, were you going to say something about that?
Was that John Pomeroy?
On the Milo character?
Yeah, because I know you worked on him.
You might be. It's been so long, I cannot remember. He kind of has floppy hair. You might be right. It might be John Pomeroy. I'll have to look. I'll look and we'll reconvene after.
Because I also follow him on Instagram.
Well, if it is him, I'm going to have to go in and jump in and follow him because that phrase changed my life.
That ties into what we've talked about on the podcast before, which is what Jack Kirby said in an interview with Will Eisner, is that one man can be the school for another.
Oh, that's awesome. I think I might get that tattooed.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome.
That's very true, because what you said right there, you hear another artist say something, and it just completely blows your mind.
Yeah, it's stuck with, like I said, 20 years. I have said it at every talk I've ever given. It's never leaving my brain. It's stuck with me forever.
And you use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
All right, let's move on. Okay, so our best bud, JRD, J. Robert Deans, who had a past as a comics retailer, and now he's in the biz on the other side of the table. JRD is one of our favorite people. Asked Scotty, was Richard Thompson an influence at all? Your line work reminds me of his dip pin work in the cul-de-sac.
You know what? He wasn't, but I discovered him later. I adore his work. I adore it. I have the complete collection, the little box set, not the little, but the big box set that came out. I love his work, but I did not discover it until much later in life. But once I did, I absolutely fell in love. So I'm a huge fan, though he was not an influence, though I would imagine that we came from the same influences, which is, I think a lot of times when you see people that are similar, while they might not be aware of each other, they were probably coming from the same sources themselves.
Yeah. Okay. We're going back a bit to the beginning. So our buddy Garhide asks, for all of us, do you guys feel your artist fuel what is in your tank, Scotty Young, affected by the lack of cons? So do you miss the energy meeting your fans at cons provide? Or maybe to embellish on this question a little bit, how is the lack of cons or doing virtual things now, how does that affect your emotional energy?
I do miss. So I have two answers for this. It has not affected my fuel not going to cons. In fact, it's left more fuel in my tank. I do though miss I'm a very big extrovert. So I do miss the energy of the fans, even though after a con I'm absolutely dead.
Right.
Yeah. What I do think that people don't realize is cons, while amazing, they do not only take the 3 days that we're there. That's usually 5 to 6 days of not just prep, but the ramping up to it's fine, but especially in the early days where I'm like, luckily now, like I've set up a system where people help me and I have employees and like things do, the machine's working. But like back when I had to prep, it was like a week of prep. And then after the con, you're so exhausted. You're not walking up to the drawing table on Monday morning and drawing anything. Like you're dead. Yeah. And so really there's like 2 days of decompression. Then there's a day of like, what am I supposed to be doing? Oh, now I'm behind on 7 things. So weirdly enough, that aspect, I've gotten a better grip on my schedule because I'm not jumping on planes. And bolting away so frequently. I do miss the energy of fans. I haven't done as many of the virtual situations simply because there was such an onslaught of them. I have a really big hang up with fairness. And I have a really big problem saying yes to one thing if I have to say no to 7 other things. Okay. So sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'm just not going to do any for a while because I'm just like, I'm going to keep my head down. But we also went through a big thing for a while too. We had some family health stuff that my wife was gone for a while. So when the shutdown first happened, I was working from home alone with my 2 kids for about 5 or 6 weeks. So like that's right when all the virtual things started to kick off. Yeah. And I just didn't have the bandwidth by the end of the night after working and dadding all day the night. So I just had to skip a lot of that stuff. So it's nice now to be able to jump back on. And I'm very picky and choosy. I knew like I wanted to do this because I knew we were going to sit around and talk shop. And clearly I'm not short-winded on running my mouth when it comes.
I love it, bro.
Yeah. Also the thing about a con is that it's the complete opposite of your daily experience as a cartoonist, which is focused about this far away from your face,
right? Working,
and then all of a sudden you're in a room and you're trying to draw something that you're not familiar with, and people are asking you questions, and can you find this? And it's like it's like an obstacle.
It's wild, cons, especially for these last 7 or 8 years for me have been wild. Like cons are like this is bonkers. It's exhausting. Like it's really hard.
Yeah, and I think the last time we saw each other in person, it might have been at New York, 2018. Where's the time? It might be 2018. Right? Yeah. Because I canceled 2019. I was going to go, and your line is like down the street and around the corner, real talk. So I mean, just thinking of, and we talk about this a little bit. I talk more about it on my coffee break about the energy out that you have to exert just to get through it. And you're a gregarious guy. We all have pretty good attitudes. And you just like meeting and greeting and meeting and signing and greeting and meaning, can I get a hot dog, please? And Scotty, you need anything? And a weekend goes by, and the second that you drop, or you're just like, dude, I really need a burrito. I got to pull away from this for a minute. You can lose fans that quickly.
No, that's you're nailing it. And there is like, as soon as I realized that I started needing help.
Yeah.
So, I brought on my friend Drew has been helping me for years. And now Megan has been helping me, and Drew along with Megan. They are absolute lifesavers because they can see me. Like
Fall over.
Right. Well, they know. Yeah, they know, because it's like for people who don't know, like I am like I said, I'm a big extrovert. I like everybody in line to feel like we just became friends, because that's what I want. Like, I'm kind of like, I want to talk about movies, and I will talk about what, like, did you see this? And we'll talk about music. And a lot of people know I like music, so I'll end up getting in a music conversation with people. So I'm usually like a good 5 minutes per person as I'm signing books, and we're having a chat, and we get to know each other. And I love it. I will never in a million years complain about it. But what happens after you've done it for, so many hours in that one day, you do, without knowing it, you have used up all the fuel, and now you all of a sudden you're hungry, your blood sugar's low, you're on the other side of it, and you're starting to get testy, right?
You're
and all of a sudden
Ripley, you're grinding the gears.
Right.
He's
Right.
grinding metal.
Right. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, did I just snap at that person? And so luckily now I have really close people who are my dear friends, who are like, they see it and they're kind of do a little tap and be like, all right, last person in line, and then we can wrap it up. And they know, like, go, like, get out. And then we come back a couple hours later, we refresh or whatever. It's a really important transition for me on that point, because there's nothing worse than feeling like, listen, every single person in that line put money down to come here. They got a hotel room. They probably brought their kids. They're probably dropping all types of stacks of cash on food and all the business. And the last thing that I want them to feel like is, while they stood in my line for an hour, when they finally got up to me, I was pissy because they were out of pizza.
Oh.
Right. I don't want that. I would feel terrible, and I understand. Like, so I try to be empathetic on that, and be aware, and I try to think of that ahead of time and build in safe spaces where I'm like, okay, I got to get out of here now before I turn into a werewolf.
Yeah. And some people are really good at making that transition seamless. Like, hey guys, listen, I love you. I gotta go to the bathroom.
Right.
Just chill, and I'll be back.
Right.
Usually people are like, oh, okay. But some people just, they go too far and then they can't return from it. And that's when people snap, or they're just, Jesus Christ, you people just wait a minute, and you people really easily.
Well, I think that's why that's another thing of feeling like I've got the right people with me. Like Megan and Drew have always been, Drew especially, because he's been with me for years, and Megan just started out this last couple of years, or this last year, having a really good people with you that now, I mean, Megan and Drew have fans. Like Drew has line fans. Like some of them come in the line because they're like, they can't wait to get up and have their 25 minutes with Drew until they get around the corner for me. Because like he's that cool, right? Like, so that's really cool. And that helps the experience for everybody. The other cool thing that a byproduct of the cons that I've come to know is, there have been people that have met each other in line at at a con, and they are like, they've become friends. It's like old school message board people. Like, they become friends. Like, they go out to dinner and they hang out and they become a community with each other, which I'm like, that's super cool, man. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's wild. But yeah, that's something we don't really talk about. Just, having a squad at some of these shows at certain points in your career, and even if you're like just starting out, it's good just to have some help. You can't do it all.
No. And also, there's guys you'll sit next to. They roll up. They got their like travel case. They roll up and they're like, they open it up. They go, and they're there for like an hour or two. They sign, and then they fold everything back up, and then they roll away. They're like 3 hours a day for like,
Right.
Yeah, But if you have products, product.
Yeah, we have the whole thing. Yeah, we got a pretty elaborate setup. So I usually do 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on. I just do a rotation, like, and then Megan or Drew stays back, and we've got the prints and books, and well, back in the day when there was conventions.
Do you have a thing at appearances, Scotty, where you kind of keep like a whiteboard, like with your schedule on it? Because you go and do signings in other places on the show floor and things like that, or are you pretty stationary in Artist Alley?
I don't do that much signing anywhere else. I am very much like, you know what? Listen, I get the concept, because I mean, even so, like unless we're promoting a product at Marvel, or like we're really pushing stuff, I don't even really go to the Marvel booth that often, because I just like, look, I'm here. Like, I don't want, because you know what's going to happen? These people are going to be in this line, and then they're going to those same people are going to move over to that line. And I'm like, that's like being at the airport and you're like first in line to board, and they're like, oh, sorry, we're changing gates. Like, what? What? Like, so like once I realize the line situation, I pretty much do signings pretty much exclusively at my Artist Alley table. And yeah, we do a schedule. We always put the schedule up at the beginning of the morning, so you can, I know that everybody, you're trying to get to this panel, and this, this person's got a signing. So we try to make it as easy for you to plan as possible. And sometimes those run over, and sometimes they don't, or whatever. But yeah, we put it up each morning, just based on whatever the day is or what the hours of the day are.
One last convention question is that I know a lot. Well, there's like a subculture of a subculture. There's so many like corners in comics, where I'm sure you have a lot of original art collectors who are fans of yours, or sketch raiders. Like, I know a lot. There's like a circuit of guys who just have sketchbooks, right? And you see them kind of standing off to the corner with their data pads, and just like, oh, Scotty gets the blue one and the red one. And, do you have like a commission list, or do you just kind of sign stuff and get through?
That has changed a lot over the years. That's been the most drastic change over the years. That's where I started making my money. I was fast. Yeah. So there were some weekends where I would do 50 to 70 sketches, which means I was
ouch, man.
At the hotel at night, at the bar. I was just like the whole grind, right? Then once the cover started, and then I realized, like, whoa, I'm actually spending more time signing things than I am anything else. Then it became like, okay, I'll take a very small list. Then like that first come first serve thing stopped working, because like retailers and things got in line first, and I was like, I couldn't figure out a thing. So once I went to Italy, and it's very customary in Europe to do a drawing, and not just a signature, but a drawing, and not like a full con sketch, but some sort of little doodle. Yeah. But obviously you can't do one for everybody. So, Panini brought me over when they were in Germany, when they were doing the Oz books. I said Italy, I meant Germany. Panini brought me over to Germany, and the way that they did it was, if you bought a book, then you got in line with your receipt and you rolled dice. And if you got doubles, then you got a sticker on your receipt, and that meant that you got a sketch.
Wow.
Right? So I was like, that is awesome.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
So for about the last 5 or 6 years, I just adopted that. That was my sketch list. I didn't take a list. You were in line. I had a bag of dice. You could pick whatever ones you wanted. If you rolled doubles, I did you a sketch right there. I know you had to pay for it. You didn't get it for free, but that became my lottery system, which was amazing, because it was a unique fan interaction between us that was going to be fun. Like, people would be like, and I'd let you, like, if you wanted to spend another hour and a half in line, you could go do it again, and people would, and they'd be up there like their third roll, and I'd be like, oh, and like sometimes the dice will roll off the table, it'll roll down the aisle, and everybody's like, don't touch it, and everybody's screaming. So it became like a really fun, again, a way. I have a Bluetooth speaker at my table. I've always got music playing. So it's like, we're having a little bit of a mini party while you're there. So that became my situation.
Yeah. Your table is like an attraction, right? People get online. They're like passing a beach ball around, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. So that's where it went. But then it still became a point. Like, it still was getting to a point where it was like, the drawing part of being at a convention for me started to get so difficult that I felt like I was doing bad drawings. Like I'm not happy with the drawings.
That's
a lot
hard.
of people.
That's
Yeah,
very-
and
it's
a
very
lot of
hard.
people, like a lot of people were hacking the dice situation. So now, you know, the resellers were bringing 10 people with them. Right. So like now you've got 10 people with the same crew rolling the dice, and they a lot of them would hit it, and that's fine. Listen, if you hack the system, you hack the system. I'm not gonna hate on that. Like I'm a hustler. I like a hustle.
Right.
But what I realized was this past year we are pretty much phasing out. I'm phasing out con sketches. I don't have I'm like the older I'm getting, I don't have the bandwidth for it. And I sell so much original art on the website. We sell daily sketches every Tuesday. We have original art sales all the time. We do art books with drawings in them. We do remark books sometimes. So if you want to own something with a drawing of mine, there are absolutely tons of ways to do it that I think conventions as it is right now, that part of it's probably done for me for a while, because it was eating up a lot of time and the lines are really long, and I hate making people stand in line, you know, because they want to go, you know, kids are with them and kids are crying and hungry. And because again, my line is filled with a lot of families and kids, and they want the baby cover. They want the print with the baby Deadpool, and they want that. And when they've been an hour for a long, I have that age kid. He will not stand in line for an hour. And if I make him, he is going to make my life hell.
Right.
And so I'm trying to pass that along in a different way. Yeah.
Also, everybody is tired by the time you get to the convention. You're already tired.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you never had enough sleep. You don't get enough sleep at the convention.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing the sketches, you're doing them back in your hotel room. So you're actually working harder
Yeah.
Right.
to go to the convention for 4 or 5, 6 days.
Yeah.
And then you come back. It's like, it really does require a superhuman amount of effort. And I'm with you. I don't like doing a bad sketch, because then later on you'll see that sketch on.
I know.
Somebody's like, "Oh man, why did I fuck that face up like that?"
Right. Also, can we talk about how they make Sunday Family Day? Because by Sunday, there's not an artist in there not hungover. Just we're all hammered. We're all we've not went to sleep before 3 a.m. for 4 days. Like, and then Sunday's like, it's Family Day. And it's like,
that's wild. And then you have to kind of be on in a whole different way.
Absolutely.
When the kids and the strollers in front of you.
Yeah. I learned 10 years, 15 years ago, not to drink at a con. I have a drink when I'm eating, but I can't do that thing where I go and then you're like next day
hitting the wall, right?
Right, yeah. And then you're like you're if you're hungover or you're tired, and then people are like coming up and you're like, what?
Yeah. Yep.
Then I don't enjoy it. Right?
Sure,
And
for sure.
I don't enjoy it. So you know, it's like if I want to party, I would just party. If I want a convention, convention. I don't try to combine them now.
You don't try to Voltron your partying.
No. And most of the people, I have to say, in my crew or my circle of friends, they're also kind of beyond that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, maybe you do that when you're like 24. You're out.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But you know,
right.
When you hit the 5-0, you're not.
Yeah, no, ours is mostly like we're big foodies. So what happens for us is we leave the convention, then we go actually just spend about 5 or 6 hours at a restaurant. We don't even, it's not even partying, but it is like we just had a little like, oh, that the chef kept bringing out bottles of wine, and we're like, oh snap.
Next thing you know, you're closing it out,
actually,
right?
That's actually a bigger part of going to a convention.
Yeah,
is figuring out where you're going to eat, how 100%. Many maximum people you can put in your party.
Oh no! See that I didn't know.
Comes up and goes like, "I brought 5 dudes," and next thing you got 25 people, and you can't get 25 people in any place to eat.
You could ask any of my friends, Mike. I am notorious. If you roll up to me and be like, "Oh, can we bring?" I'm just like, "Nope, you super can't." No, I said we have 5. I have a reservation for 5 people. That's it. Like I'm not crossing over into 8 because 8 is actually 20.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because when you hit that 5 people, you know the 5. You know, like you're not bringing, and we know each other well enough. You get to 10, and then 10 is like, oh, 3 of them brought 4 other people. They're not telling you.
Well, Scotty, my secret is breakfast. Like, I'm not even fighting people for dinner, but breakfast is dope.
I'm a breakfast dude. I'm a morning person too, so I'm
breakfast.
like, I'll hook up breakfast with you anytime you want. I'm a breakfast head.
Yeah, the last couple of years, I actually I did room service, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You go out to those places. Those places are so slammed with people. You get shitty food anyway, right? And
well, that's why I love doing
end.
Right. That's why I love going like to Chicago, because like, you know, I love going to C2E2 because we just leave the area. I mean, I lived there for a long time too, so we know the spots.
You know where to go, right?
Yeah, but we go out to the restaurants and we're like, oh, we're gonna eat at this spot, or we're gonna eat at that spot. We're gonna go to Pequod's Pizza. We're gonna go to Alinea and get like the crazy ass science foodie food. Like it's gonna be fun. So yeah, I mean, that's honestly, if you want to ask me what I miss most about conventions, it's the food. All like the restaurants that I miss going to in each city that I got used to, you know.
Usually if people come into, well, we're talking about this like there's shows right now. If you come to Philly, I'll take you to the cheesesteak spot. Like,
well, I've been to that's down there.
Spots,
what's the one spot? Because I went down. What's the street that has like the clubs and stuff?
Oh, South Street? Is that where?
Yeah, is that South Street? Yeah, I've been on the South Street.
You probably went to Jim Steaks.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That's a good cheesesteak. It's not really that good.
That's all right. Well, I'll take care of you. Don't worry.
Take care of me. Yeah, take care of me. I need that.
All right, we have time for one last question.
Okay.
And Gar kind of put this in a couple of times, and then we're going to go home. Gar says, I'll still beg a last time, Scotty, please, please, please. When will we get boy at the end?
I love that he just asked this. It's so like, I love that we've hit on 2 things that actually were brought up last night. So I had said that like we started off this whole thing. The very first question you guys asked me was talk about the portal. And I said, oh my God, last night my wife went out and went downstairs and grabbed, my first comic book. And also last night we were talking about, Megan was over and we were talking about what's up for our store, the Stupid Fresh Mess store for the year and what our plans are. And they both were like, what are you going to do with Boy at the End? And I was like, they both want me to do prints and the merch and stuff with it. And because I don't have it yet, I have it. It's this beast of mine, man. It's this character who I've been using as like almost as a cipher for exploring emotions and feelings and questions and just he ends up being a meditation on anything that I'm feeling at any moment. And I'm like, I don't know what to draw today, but I have this situation. I use this character to kind of like search for that and like a one image type of narrative. And I've had different versions of what I want that to be as a book, or do I just collect it do I just do these single things and have them be, is it a mixture of, well, here's a poem and here's a single narrated thing and here's a short story. I don't know, but it absolutely will be a thing when I figure it out. It's one of those weird close things. And I'm not usually, this is what I explained to Casey and Megan last night was, I will sell everything. I sell, like if you walk up to me like, those are some dope shoestrings, I'll be like, I'll sell them to you. Like if you want to buy them, you can buy them. Right. I
love it. Yeah.
Like I don't hold a lot of stuff close like it's precious. Right. But Boy, I was like, I can't make Boy at the End merch yet because I don't have it yet. That's my one at this time right now. It's my one precious thing. And until I figure out exactly how I need to manifest that as a product, whether it's what kind of book it is, if it's an art kind of book, or if it's like I don't know. It will happen. It's just, it's still marinating on what exactly it is. But I absolutely love Gar's interest in this, and other people ask this on the regular. I love that there's that kind of interest when people can connect with and understand that there's some real feeling behind that. So I appreciate that question.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Scotty, we had a fantastic time with you today, sir.
Thank you, man.
I hope you feel that this is worth your energy and time.
I loved it, dude. This was great. This was such a good. It was such a in a time where an extrovert is lacking all ability to to take advantage of any to vert. Right. Yeah. Well, in a time where that's the situation, like nights like this, where like I can just like genuinely bond with people who like breaking down and like none of us really have the answers, but we like to pose the questions and just throw out options, and that's fun for me. And I learned a lot tonight. I learned as much tonight as I probably answered. So no, it was great. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Awesome. Yeah.
So Scotty, where can people follow you on the socials and maybe do a plug for your store?
Yeah, so you can just run over to Instagram is just Scotty Young, at Scotty Young on all the things except TikTok. I think I'm the official Scotty Young, the real Scotty Young. Somebody else grabbed my name first. Stupid TikTok.
Yeah.
But ScottyYoung.com is my website. And we have a fully functioning store where we have prints and all my creator-owned books and Marvel books, and we're actually an official diamond retailer now. So we do our own exclusive covers for certain books. And
that's I like that. That's nice.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, so right now we got King and Black exclusive, King and Black #1 exclusive covers. We had Strange Academy #1 exclusive covers that you could only get at ScottyYoung.com. We do original art daily sketch sales every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central. So whatever drawings I did the previous week are going to be for sale every Tuesday. They go fast. A couple minutes, they're going to be gone. But and then we have a mailing list that you could sign up for there too, where we usually give our mailing list first dibs and first crack at almost any launch or any sale before it's public. We let them know what time it's going to launch, so they can have everything ready and grab stuff before we let the public know. So signing up for our the Stupid Fresh Mess Stupid Fresh Mess is my company's name. So if you sign up for the newsletter over there, you'll get some exclusive stuff from time to time and get dibs on almost everything we launch.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Scotty, hang out with us while we sign off. I don't know if you see this. We have a little thing we do at the end.
All right.
All right, just play along. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Thanks to our guest, Scotty Young. It was a fantastic guest. It's almost a great way to wrap up this trash year with a fantastic guest. You made everything so much better at the end of this. Thank you so much.
You cleansed the palate of 2020.
That's right.
I love it.
That's right. It's like we reset our sniffers by
love it.
Sniffing your beans, Scotty.
Yeah.
Pause. All right, guys, we're going to go home. So thank you so much, everybody. If you're new watching us tonight on YouTube or Facebook, sign up, follow us, subscribe, drop kick that bell.
And go watch all the other podcasts.
Yeah, that's right. You just watch ours. Don't worry about the rest of those cats. All right, guys, we're going to sign out. Thank you so much for our disembodied face in the clouds, Brett Blevins, who's shining down on us. There he is. Let's say goodnight from Mike Manley. I'm Jamar Nicholas. This has been Pencil to Pencil. We'll see you next Wednesday. And don't forget, all right, Scotty, wash your Kirby hands.
Oh, Kirby hands.
There you go. Perfect. Nice extension. Have a good night, guys.